Sitting at Christmas dinner, the table glowing with lights and laughter, only for your own mother to suddenly announce, "We're ashamed of you." Everyone freezes.
Forks midair. All eyes on you. That was me, Viola.
And in that moment, after years of staying silent, I said one thing that made my mother burst into tears, and it changed everything. If you've ever been belittled by family, if you've ever wished for the perfect words to defend yourself, hit that like button, subscribe, and stay tuned. Because this isn't just another family revenge story, it's about how speaking truth, at the most unexpected moment, finally set me free. My name is Viola, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the different one in my family. Some families are built on unconditional love, where no matter what choices you make, you feel accepted.
Mine wasn't like that.
In our house, love came with strings, and those strings were woven from achievement, reputation, and appearances. My mom, Eleanor, was obsessed with the way people saw us. She cared more about what the neighbors whispered over their fences than about how we felt behind closed doors. She was the type of woman who ironed the curtains before hosting guests, who spent days rehearsing perfect Christmas dinners down to the matching napkin rings. To her, family wasn't about messy reality. It was about looking like the picture-perfect household you could brag about in a glossy newsletter.
And oh, she loved those newsletters.
Every Christmas, like clockwork, she mailed out her annual family update.
It was filled with paragraphs about my siblings' achievements.
My older brother Mark, the star, straight-A student, varsity athlete, eventually law school. My sister Caroline, the golden daughter, talented pianist, on a roll, later married a successful doctor. Their accomplishments filled whole pages, photos of graduations, weddings, new homes, babies.
And then there was me.
In those newsletters, I was usually reduced to one polite sentence, something vague like Viola is finding her way.
Or sometimes nothing at all.
I still remember one year, I must have been 16, when she literally forgot to include me. A whole page about Mark's college scholarship, a paragraph about Caroline's music competition, and nothing about her youngest child. I asked her why, and she brushed me off.
Well, honey, I didn't know what to write.
You don't really have much to put in, do you?
Those words burned into me.
Nothing to put in. As if my life didn't count unless it impressed the neighbors. The truth was, I didn't shine in the same way my siblings did. I wasn't terrible at school, I got decent grades, I was curious, I loved learning.
But my passion wasn't math equations or science fairs. My heart belonged to art and writing.
I would spend hours sketching in notebooks, creating characters and worlds, scribbling stories that poured out of me like water.
To me, that was magic.
To my mom, it was a hobby. Whenever relatives came over, she'd parade Mark and Caroline around like trophies. Mark's going to be a lawyer. Caroline's practicing for another recital. And when it came to me, she'd chuckle lightly and say something like, "And Viola's still doodling." It was meant to sound harmless, but it cut deeper than she ever realized. By the time I was a teenager, I learned my role in the family. Stay quiet, don't rock the boat, let my siblings shine. At dinner, I sat at the end of the table, listening to conversations I was rarely included in. When I tried to speak up about a story I was writing or a small achievement, it was often dismissed with a quick nod before the conversation shifted back to my brother's internships or my sister's recitals. That's how I grew up. Present, but invisible. The thing about living that way is that eventually, invisibility becomes second nature.
You stop expecting encouragement.
You stop expecting anyone to ask how you're doing. And worst of all, you start believing the lie that maybe you don't matter as much. But here's what my mom never realized. Silence doesn't mean absence. I may not have been the loudest voice in the room, but inside, I was building worlds. I was watching, learning, collecting emotions like colors on a palette. Every time she belittled me, I stored it away, turning pain into fuel.
Still, it wasn't easy.
Every holiday, every family dinner, came with its own quiet humiliation.
I remember one Thanksgiving when my aunt asked if I had college plans.
Before I could answer, my mom laughed and said, "Viola hasn't figured it out yet. She's still dreaming." Everyone chuckled politely. I laughed too, but that night I cried myself to sleep. By the time I reached my 20s, I realized that no matter what I achieved in my own way, it would never be enough for her. My siblings could do no wrong. Their successes were her crown jewels.
Me?
I was the smudge she couldn't polish out of the family portrait. So when I finally told her I didn't want to go to law school, that I wanted to pursue writing seriously, she looked at me with genuine horror. Viola, do you know how ridiculous that sounds?
Do you think people make real lives out of scribbling? That's not success.
That's failure waiting to happen.
Failure.
That word became her favorite label for me. She wore it like a shield, as if calling me a failure would prevent the world from saying it first. But what she didn't know was that I carried those words everywhere, through college, through jobs, through endless nights wondering if she was right. And yet, somewhere deep down, I kept going. I took jobs that barely paid rent just to stay close to my passion. I taught art classes at community centers. I freelanced. I submitted short stories that got rejected again and again. And every rejection felt like confirmation of her voice in my head. See?
You'll never make it. But I didn't stop.
Because the truth is, sometimes the very pain that breaks you is also the fire that keeps you alive. By the time that fateful Christmas rolled around, I was 29 years old. Nearly 3 decades of playing the background character in my own family's story. Nearly 3 decades of being made to feel like a disappointment. And yet, what my mom didn't know was that I had finally done it. I had signed my first real book deal. A contract with an actual publisher. The kind of thing I had dreamed of since I was a kid. For the first time, I had something undeniable. Something even she couldn't brush off as just a hobby.
But I kept it quiet.
I wanted to choose the right moment, to share it in a way that felt powerful. Maybe, just maybe, I thought, this Christmas would be different.
I had no idea just how different it would be. That Christmas, I walked into my parents' house with my heart pounding in my chest.
The smell of rosemary, garlic, and roasted turkey filled the air, wrapping the house in that warm, holiday glow. Strings of white lights twinkled on the banister, ornaments sparkled on the tree, and Bing Crosby's voice floated softly from the speakers. On the surface, it looked like something out of a Hallmark movie. But beneath that picture-perfect setting, I felt the familiar tension pressing down on me. My mom had outdone herself, as always. The dining table looked like it belonged in a lifestyle magazine. Crystal glasses, folded napkins shaped like poinsettias, plates rimmed in gold. She always said the table was a reflection of the family. To her, everything had to shine. The dishes, the decorations, the children.
And if something didn't shine, she pretended it didn't exist.
One by one, my siblings arrived with their families. My brother Mark came first, his wife on his arm, their 2 children bounding in with matching red sweaters. Mark carried himself with the confidence of someone who had always known he was the favorite. My mother beamed as she hugged him, her voice lilting with pride as she announced to anyone listening, "Mark just made partner at the firm this year." Then Caroline swept in, glowing as always. Her husband, the doctor, carried a tray of desserts, while their 3 children clung to their legs in perfectly coordinated holiday outfits. My mom practically sang as she introduced them. Caroline and Daniel just bought a new house near the lake. And the kids, oh, aren't they darling? The compliments flowed like champagne, effortless and abundant.
And then there was me.
I arrived alone, carrying a bottle of wine I'd saved up for, my coat slightly damp from the snow outside. I forced a smile as my mom hugged me, though her embrace felt more like formality than warmth. She didn't announce anything about me, no updates, no pride. Just a quick, "Oh, Viola's here," before she turned back to fuss over the grandkids. I slipped into my usual place at the table, the quiet corner seat. From there, I watched the familiar script play out, my mom showering praise on Mark and Caroline, everyone laughing at their stories, the spotlight shining brightly on their accomplishments. And though I smiled, inside, I was restless. Because what no one at that table knew, not even my mom, was that I had a secret. A good one. A life-changing one. Just weeks before, I had signed a book deal. A real publisher. Enough to finally prove that my years of chasing silly dreams weren't wasted. I hadn't told anyone yet. I wanted the timing to be right. Maybe tonight, I thought. Maybe at Christmas dinner, when everyone's gathered and listening, I'll finally share my news. Maybe for once, my mom will look at me the way she looks at Mark and Caroline, with pride instead of disappointment. Little did I know, she had other plans. Dinner started off like any other holiday gathering. The plates clinked, silverware scraped gently, and the hum of conversation filled the room. My mom carved the turkey with her usual flair, smiling like the director of her own stage play. At first, the spotlight was on my siblings, as always. Mark told a long story about closing a difficult case at his firm, and the whole table laughed at his punchline. Caroline chimed in about her kids' piano lessons, her voice brimming with that practiced mix of humility and pride. My mom's eyes sparkled as she added little details, bragging for them even more than they bragged for themselves. I sat quietly, listening, chewing carefully, smiling when appropriate. My heart beat a little faster each time the conversation paused, hoping maybe someone would ask me about my life.
About my writing. About anything. But no one did.
Finally, when the plates were nearly cleared and the wine glasses refilled, my mom lifted hers for a toast. It was her tradition, the annual Christmas speech, her favorite part of the night. She loved it because it was her chance to present her children like polished jewels for everyone to admire. She raised her glass high, her voice ringing with practiced cheer. This year has been so wonderful for our family.
Mark became partner at his law firm. Caroline and Daniel bought their dream house.
We are just so blessed with such hardworking, successful children.
Everyone clapped politely. I forced my lips into a smile, though my stomach churned. And then, she turned to me. As for Viola, I felt my chest tighten. This was it, I thought.
Maybe tonight she'd finally mention my writing. Maybe she'd at least acknowledge that I was working hard, even if it wasn't the path she wanted for me. I braced myself for a scrap of recognition.
But what came out of her mouth froze me in place.
She gave a small, dismissive laugh, and said loudly enough for the entire table to hear. Well, honestly, we don't have much to say. Viola, we're ashamed of you.
The room went dead silent. Forks froze midair.
My sister's husband looked down at his plate. Even the kids seemed to sense the tension and stopped fidgeting. Ashamed. The word rang in my ears like a bell I couldn't unhear.
Not disappointed.
Not concerned. Ashamed. Heat rushed to my cheeks. My palms grew sweaty against the fabric of my napkin. I could feel every eye at the table on me, waiting for me to shrink, to laugh it off, to play the role I always played, the quiet daughter who absorbed the humiliation so everyone else could stay comfortable. But this time, something inside me shifted. This time, I couldn't stay silent. My mother's words hung in the air like smoke from a fire you couldn't escape.
Ashamed of you.
The phrase echoed in my head, louder than the clinking glasses, louder than the crackling fireplace. My face burned hot, but my chest felt icy cold, as if the words had knocked the breath out of me. In the past, I would have laughed nervously, maybe mumbled something self-deprecating to ease the tension. That was the role I'd played my whole life, the daughter who swallowed the insults so everyone else could keep enjoying their meal.
But not this time. Because deep inside me was something new.
Something stronger. For weeks, I'd been holding on to the news of my book deal, the proof that all those years of hard work weren't wasted. And in that moment, sitting there with humiliation pressing down on me, I realized I didn't need my mother's approval to feel proud. My fork slipped from my hand and hit the plate with a sharp clink. Every head turned. My heart pounded so hard I thought the whole table could hear it. My palms trembled, but I lifted my eyes and locked them on hers. Really, Mom?
My voice was steadier than I expected.
You're ashamed of me?
Her eyebrows arched, caught off guard.
Well, Viola, look around you, she said, gesturing to the table. Your brother, your sister, they've accomplished so much. And you, she trailed off with a sigh, as if the rest of the sentence was too obvious to say aloud.
That was it. The crack in the dam.
I straightened in my chair, heat flooding my chest, and for the first time in my life, I didn't shrink. I expanded. I'm proud of myself, I said firmly. The table went utterly still. My brother's fork froze halfway to his mouth. Caroline's eyes widened. My mom blinked as though she'd misheard. Proud? Of what? She asked, her tone sharp, incredulous. My throat tightened, but I pushed the words out like they'd been waiting years to be spoken. Of following a dream you never believed in. Of working when no one thought it mattered. Of finally making it. Confusion flickered across her face. Making it? What do you mean? I leaned forward, my hands gripping the edge of the table. I just signed a book deal, Mom. A real one. With a real publisher. I've spent years proving to myself that I'm not the failure you think I am. And you know what? I did it. I succeeded, without your approval, without your support. So no, I'm not ashamed. Not anymore. Her mouth fell open, words lost somewhere between disbelief and shock. For the first time in nearly 30 years, the silence belonged to me, and not to her. For a moment, my mother just stared at me, her face pale, her lips trembling as though the words had knocked the wind out of her. She opened her mouth, then closed it, the way someone might when they've lost their place in a script they've rehearsed 1,000 times.
The silence at the table was deafening.
The only sound was the soft crackle of the fireplace and the faint jingle of Christmas music drifting in from the living room. My siblings sat frozen, their eyes darting between me and my mom as if they were watching a glass vase teeter on the edge of a table, waiting to see if it would shatter. Finally, she let out a sharp, shaky breath. Her fork slipped from her fingers and clattered onto her plate. "You," she began, her voice breaking.
"You think I don't love you? That I wanted to hurt you?"
Her eyes glistened, and for the first time in my life, I saw her look small, vulnerable. Not the polished, commanding matriarch who always had the perfect lines ready. She was raw, exposed, like a mask had finally slipped.
I swallowed hard.
My hands were still trembling, but my voice was steady. "Love isn't humiliation, Mom.
Love isn't calling your daughter shame in front of a whole family. Love is showing up, even when you don't understand her choices.
Love is encouragement, not tearing someone down because they don't fit the mold you created."
Her chin quivered.
She pressed a hand to her mouth as if trying to stop herself from crying, but the tears came anyway. Hot, fast, and real. She shook her head slowly, whispering, I thought pushing you would make you stronger." My chest ached at her words, a mix of anger, sorrow, and something I hadn't expected, pity. Because for the first time, I realized she wasn't as invincible as I thought. She had built her entire identity on the success of her children, on the picture-perfect image she could project to the world. And in doing so, she had blinded herself to who I really was. Caroline reached across the table and touched her hand gently. "Mom," she said softly, "you have to see how much that hurt her." Even Mark, usually silent during conflict, muttered, "She didn't deserve that."
The dam broke.
My mother covered her face with both hands and sobbed, her shoulders shaking, mascara streaking down her cheeks. The woman who had always controlled the narrative, who had dictated the roles we played in her family theater, was unraveling right before us. And all I could think was, after all these years, the truth had finally hit her harder than any insult ever could. The sound of my mother's sobs filled the dining room, so raw and unfamiliar it made the walls themselves seem to lean in and listen. This was the same woman who had built her life around composure, who had orchestrated every dinner, every holiday, every family moment like a stage play, and now her script had unraveled.
No one moved at first.
Caroline rubbed Mom's hand gently, whispering words I couldn't make out. Mark stared at his plate, his jaw tight, caught between discomfort and something like guilt. Even the children sat silently, their wide eyes darting nervously from face to face.
But me?
For the first time, I felt a strange calm settling over me. My heart was still beating fast, my hands still tingled from adrenaline, but beneath it all was a steady, quiet certainty.
I had said what needed to be said.
I pushed my chair back slowly, the scrape of wood against the floor startling in the silence.
All eyes turned to me.
I stood, smoothing my hands over my dress, not because I needed to, but because I wanted that one grounding gesture. I looked at my mother, tears streaking her face, and spoke softly but firmly.
"I'm not ashamed of who I am anymore.
If you can't see that, if you can't love me without conditions, then that's on you. But I'm done letting your shame define me." Her head lifted, eyes red and swollen, lips parted as if to argue, but no words came.
I glanced at my siblings. Caroline's eyes brimmed with tears of her own.
She mouthed the words, "I'm proud of you." Mark gave a short nod, not quite ready to meet my gaze but clearly shaken. For once, no one rushed to smooth over my mother's mess. No one excused her behavior. I picked up my coat from the back of the chair. My legs trembled, but each step away from that table felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd buried long ago. The clink of dishes and faint Christmas music followed me as I walked down the hallway, each note a reminder that the world outside that dining room kept spinning. Behind me, I heard my mom's voice break again. "Viola," she whispered, but I didn't stop.
Not yet.
That night, back in my small apartment, I sat on the couch in the quiet. My phone buzzed with messages, one from Caroline, "You were so brave tonight. I've never seen you stand so tall." Another from Mark, surprisingly, "You didn't deserve what she said."
"I'm sorry." But the one that stunned me came the next morning. My mom's name lit up my phone. Her voice was hoarse, fragile. "Viola," she said, I didn't realize how much I was hurting you. I thought I was protecting you from failure. But I was wrong. I am proud of you."
I just didn't know how to say it. And for the first time in my life, I believed her. For most of my life, my mother's approval was the currency I thought I needed to survive. I chased it the way a child chases a balloon in the wind, always just out of reach, always floating higher the closer I thought I came. That night, I realized the cruelest revenge wasn't screaming, wasn't vengeance in the traditional sense.
It was truth.
Truth spoken so clearly it couldn't be ignored, truth that shattered the image she had built like glass under a hammer. And it worked. The days following Christmas dinner were different. My siblings reached out, not just with words of comfort, but with a quiet solidarity I hadn't felt before. Caroline invited me over for coffee and admitted she often felt suffocated by Mom's expectations too. Mark sent me articles about mental health and personal boundaries, almost as if he was trying to make amends in his own awkward way. But the real shift came from my mother. She called more often, though her voice carried a hesitance it never had before, a carefulness, like someone stepping into unfamiliar territory. She apologized, not once, but repeatedly, each time in a slightly different way, as though she was still learning the language of accountability. For me, the sweetest revenge wasn't watching her cry or crumble.
It was watching her change.
Watching the woman who had always demanded perfection finally admit her flaws. Watching her realize that the daughter she thought she could dismiss had the strength to walk away, and the courage to set new rules. The next holiday, when we gathered again, the atmosphere was different. My mother still set the table, still cooked the meal, but there was no sharp undercurrent in her voice, no snide remarks hidden under the guise of jokes. When she introduced me to family friends, she didn't say, "This is Viola, the one who still hasn't figured things out." Instead, she said, "This is my daughter, Viola. She's finding her own path." The look in her eyes wasn't pride in the way she used to define it, measured in status, in accomplishments, in appearances.
It was something new, something softer, something real.
And as I sat there, surrounded by the same family that once left me feeling small, I realized that my revenge had been quiet, but complete.
I hadn't destroyed my mother.
I had forced her to confront the truth of who I was, and who she was. I had broken the cycle of humiliation and claimed the dignity she had tried so long to take from me. In the end, revenge didn't look like triumphing over her. It looked like finally standing tall, unashamed, while she learned to sit with the weight of her own mistakes.
And that was worth more than any apology.
Looking back, I realized the moment I stood up at that Christmas table wasn't just about calling my mother out, it was about calling myself back. For years, I had shrunk myself to fit into the box she built for me.
I believed her voice over mine. I believed her shame more than my worth. But that night changed everything.
I spoke, and the room listened. For once, she had no script to hide behind. She had to see me, raw and unpolished, and she had to face the damage her words had carved into me. My revenge wasn't fire and fury, it was dignity.
It was refusing to play small anymore.
It was showing my mother that the daughter she dismissed was no longer a child begging for love. I was a woman demanding respect. And here's the real twist. When I stopped chasing her approval, she started chasing mine. She began calling, apologizing, trying to patch the cracks she had spent years hammering into me. That was the sweetest justice of all, watching her realize that the power she thought she held over me was gone. Today, our relationship isn't perfect.
It may never be. But the balance has shifted. I speak, and she listens.
I live my life, and she doesn't get to narrate it anymore. So if you've ever been made to feel like you're not enough, by a parent, by family, by anyone, let me tell you this, the most powerful revenge isn't proving them wrong on their terms. It's living fully on your own. It's standing tall and saying, "I'm not ashamed anymore." Because once you stop carrying their shame, they are left to carry it themselves. And trust me, that weight is heavier than anything they ever put on you.